The wind on Vera 9 was a blade, slicing through the dusk and the memories of 1,000 lost civilizations. Jace crouched in the shadow of a toppled obelisk, plasma carbine ready, visor sweeping the ancient Zephyrite enclave in tight arcs. Ruined archways loomed, half swallowed by night, their delicate glass inlays long since shattered. Moss crept over fractured mosaics, devouring the last artistry of a people gone to dust. The air tasted of static, of burnt ozone and coming violence. His quarry was close, the last living Lyrian, the sole survivor of a race erased by war and avarice. Jace found her kneeling amid a scatter of glass shards, moonlight glancing off her skin. A shifting tapestry of blue and violet scales that shimmered in the dying light. She was tall and slender, alien and regal, crowned by an iridescent crest that rippled with every breath. Even in defeat, her posture was unbowed. The fine lines of her face were proud, eyes wide and vivid violet, with vertical pupils that caught the fading sun. Jace steadied his carbine, heart pounding in his chest. The Oranax Consortium had promised him a fortune for proof of the Lyran's existence, and far more for her safe capture. His suit's servos hummed softly as he shifted weight, every movement calculated. He advanced, a silent shadow among ghosts, the wind carrying only the whisper of his breath and the hum of his visor's scan. A pebble betrayed him. It rolled beneath his boot, clattering softly. In a heartbeat, the Lyraen, Sereth, his dossier had named her, spun toward him, crest flaring with a sudden flash of color. Her gaze snapped to his, fierce and unyielding, a predator's gaze, not prey. "Don't," she said, her voice low and strange, resonant and tinged with a music that vibrated in his bones. "If you must take me, do it with honor." Jace hesitated, weapon leveled but finger hovering above the trigger. He'd been told to expect a monster, a savage survivor, desperate and wild. Instead, he found himself facing a vision of alien grace, defiance burning in her every movement. "The Consortium wants you alive," he said, the words flat, heavy. "That's all that matters." Sereth's lips curled, baring delicate fangs in disdain. "Alive, so they can dissect me. Is that your loyalty, human? To sell me to the highest bidder?" "My loyalty is to my contract," Jace replied, voice tight. He took a step closer, producing a pair of restraint bands. Light flickered along their edges. "I won't ask again." She drew herself up, dignity undimmed by threat or ruin. "You want a prize? I can offer you something greater, knowledge lost to your people." His brows furrowed, weapon steady. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes glimmered in the half-light, refusing to yield. "Do you know of the lost Terran sleeper ships?" she asked, tone measured and deliberate. He nodded, skepticism etched in every line of his face. "Old legends. Fairy tales to keep children hopeful. One is real. The Horizon." Her words were a whisper of revelation, carrying secrets that felt ancient and dangerous. "I know where it sleeps. Lead me there, and it's yours. A relic of your ancestors, untouched, waiting." Jace's thoughts raced. The bounty for Sereth's capture was immense, but a Terran ark was beyond price. The Consortium would kill for it. Others would start wars. 1,000,000 credits couldn't buy what the Horizon represented. Hope, history, a new beginning. He reached for her, torn between duty and greed, intent on securing both her and her secret. The band in his hand glowed, ready to bind her fate to his. Suddenly, the sky split open. The roar of engines shattered the silence, and a Consortium gunship descended from the clouds. Its hull glinted, weapons primed and trained, not for extraction, but for elimination. Twin barrels spat fire, energy blasts gouging the earth where Sereth had knelt a heartbeat before. Jace reacted without thinking, his soldier's instincts seizing control. He tackled Sereth behind the bulk of the obelisk as plasma fire raked the ground. The stone shuddered, flecks of ancient dust raining down. Overhead, another squad dropped from the gunship. Black armor, faceless visors, death made manifest. "Stay down," he barked, shoving Sereth lower as he leaned out, sighting down his carbine. The first attacker advanced, armor reflecting the blast light. Jace fired, his shot cutting through the air with a shriek. The round punched through the soldier's visor, dropping him instantly. Another figure lunged, blades gleaming in both hands. Jace ducked, rolled, and triggered a charge at the soldier's hip. The blast hurled the attacker back into a column where he crumpled, silent. The squad leader came next, a hulking cyborg with metal limbs and eyes that burned red. The cyborg's weapon swept in a deadly arc, but Jace was faster. He surged forward, blade drawn, and drove it beneath the armored jaw. Sparks flew as the machine collapsed, twitching. The rest of the squad scattered in confusion or died under Jace's precise shots. Within moments, the only sounds were the fading whine of dying technology and the distant hiss of the wind. Sereth rose slowly, watching him with a new respect. There was no fear now, only calculation, and perhaps the faintest flicker of hope. Jace snapped a restraint around her wrist, the band locking with a sharp hiss. "You, the ship, the secret, they're all mine now." He kept his grip firm, leading her through the ruined enclave toward his hidden vessel, the Starling. His eyes never left her, wary and hungry. "Let's see what your prize is worth." The Starling's cockpit was cramped and humming with recycled air. Metal bulkheads pressed in from every side, streaked with the scars of old battles and the grime of 1,000 desperate landings. Flickering readouts lit Jace's face as he secured Sereth in the co-pilot seat, her wrists fastened by the restraint's tether. The band was barely long enough for her to settle comfortably, and every movement made the mag locks spark with static. Still, she watched him with those unblinking violet eyes, calm and unreadable, her crest low against her skull. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd lived too long on the edge, fingers darting over the battered controls, coaxing life from the aging systems. The engine's thrum vibrated up through the deck, familiar as a heartbeat. "They'll come for us," Sereth said. Her tone was so even, so certain, that it might have been a prophecy. "Let them try," Jace replied, a wry smile twisting his lips. He didn't look at her, but the challenge in his voice was unmistakable. "I left them a little surprise on their comms relay. We've got a head start. Maybe more if we're lucky." She regarded him with a tilt of her head, the faintest ripple passing through her scales. "You should worry more about me than them," she said, her crest flattening until it hugged her skull. He snorted, glancing sideways at her. "You're my ticket out of this life, princess. I'm not letting you out of my sight until I get what I want." The ship's AI interrupted, a shrill alarm splitting the air as red light strobed across the console. "Consortium interceptors detected. 3 ships closing fast." Jace's hands flew across the throttle and nav stick. He slammed the accelerator and the Starling lurched away from Vera 9's gravity well, angling toward the dark between stars. The ship rattled, hull groaning as the planet's pale light vanished behind them. Through the viewport, the void opened up, vast and unforgiving. The tactical display flickered, enemy ships in pursuit, arrowheads of light gaining ground. They moved in perfect formation, like predators scenting blood. Jace's jaw clenched as he ran the Starling through evasive maneuvers, but the consortium was relentless. Laser fire sizzled past the shields, each near miss sending blue ripples across the canopy. Sereth leaned forward, her eyes locked on the swirling sector of the nav map, a patch of space veined with turbulent colors. "The nebula drift," she said, her voice suddenly urgent. She pointed, one elegant finger hovering above the coordinates. They won't follow. My people sense the gravitic shifts. Yours don't. Trust me, or we're both dead. He glanced at her, every instinct screaming not to trust, but the alternatives were closing in on all sides. Another barrage rocked the Starling, alarms wailing. Starling, reroute all power to forward shields, Jace barked. The AI obeyed, its voice cool amid the chaos. He punched the ship toward the nebula, the engines howling. The cockpit filled with violet and green light as they breached the outer wisps. Inside, the nebula churned with unseen tides. Gravitational eddies twisted navigation and bent the laws of physics. Jace's hands tensed on the controls. Now what? He muttered, sweat slicking his brow. Sereth's demeanor changed the moment they entered the drift. Her eyes grew distant, pupils dilating, head cocked, as if she were listening to a rhythm only she could hear. Her crest fluttered, catching the nebula's colors. Bank left, 4 degrees, cut main thrusters by a third, she said, voice low, almost trance-like. Jace hesitated, but the urgency in her tone pressed him onward. He obeyed, adjusting the controls just as a tumbling asteroid rolled into their path. The Starling skimmed past it, hull brushing dust and ion trails. Again, 2 degrees down, trust me, Sereth urged, her hand gripping the edge of the console, scales glinting in the strange light. He made the correction. The ship shuddered as another gravitic wave passed through them, but they slipped between the disturbances, moving with the current instead of against it. The consortium ships tried to follow but stumbled, caught in the nebula's twisting grip. Their signals flickered, lost amid the interference. A sudden surge bucked the Starling hard. The restraint's maglock, already weakened, sparked and failed with a sharp pop. Sereth was thrown sideways, her lithe body colliding with Jace's. For a moment her scaled arm braced across his chest, and her crest brushed his cheek, cool and whisper-soft. Jace's hand shot out to steady her, fingers catching the smooth line of her forearm. The touch sent a jolt through him, an electric pulse, fierce and possessive. Her eyes met his, wide and searching, and for a heartbeat, the chase and the danger faded, replaced by something raw and unspoken. He let her linger there, the moment stretching between them, before gently guiding her back to her seat. His hand lingered longer than it needed to. She settled, her gaze unreadable, the air between them charged with new tension. Outside, the consortium ships fell behind, their sensors scrambled, the nebula hiding the Starling like a shroud. Jace exhaled slowly, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. At last, the sensors cleared. The outlaw port of Thalas Spire loomed ahead, a tangled cluster of docking arms and flickering lights, suspended in the dark like a spider's nest. Jace guided the Starling in, threading between battered freighters, pirate corvettes, and hulking cargo haulers. The Port Authority's AI challenged them, but Jace's forged credentials held. They slid into a docking cradle, the hull settling with a tired sigh. He powered down the engines, glancing at Sereth. Her restraint was gone, the maglock fried beyond repair, but she made no move to run. A fragile trust, or perhaps exhaustion, kept her at his side. "Stay put, don't touch anything," Jace ordered, voice gruff. He paused, searching her face for some sign of rebellion, but saw only that steady, unblinking gaze. "Where would I go?" she replied, the hint of a challenge beneath her calm. "You're the only one here who doesn't want me dead." He grunted, shouldering his carbine, and slipped through the hatch, locking it behind him. The port was a chaos of shifting allegiances and dangerous faces. He moved quickly, securing supplies and information, ears always pricked for news of consortium scouts. He found what he needed: new IDs, fuel cells, a data slate with partial star charts. then returned to the ship, heart pounding with every step. He found Sereth exactly where he'd left her, but the air between them had changed. She stood by the viewport, back straight, arms folded across her chest, the last rays of the nebula's light catching her scales. Her eyes blazed with indignation. "Your files on my people are crude," she snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. "You see us as specimens, not as lives worth saving." Jace paused, peeling off his gloves. He tossed them on the console, the gesture careless. "I see everything as leverage," he replied, voice rough but honest. "That's how I survive." She bristled, the lines of her body taut with anger. Her crest rose, then smoothed as she mastered herself. He tossed her a bundle, a set of civilian clothes, simple but functional. She caught them, examining the fabric with a critical eye. "Put those on," he said, not unkindly. "You'll draw less attention dressed like a local." Sereth turned her back, shoulders stiff, and began to change. Her scales rippled with agitation, colors shifting as she shrugged out of the battered remnants of her ceremonial garb. Jace found himself watching despite himself, tracing the lines of her body as she moved, graceful, alien, and striking in a way that was anything but human. He looked away, but the image lingered, stirring something primal, something dangerous, deep inside him. The gloam, a den of smugglers and shadows, was thick with danger. Every table was a fortress, every drink a potential threat. The air simmered with old grudges and new schemes, thick with the stench of alien spirits and unspoken violence. Jace entered with Sereth at his side, his hand resting lightly but possessively on her back. Heads turned as they slipped through the haze. A human with a Lyrian was rare, enough to stir curiosity and hunger among the hardened denizens. He steered her to a secluded booth, tucked beneath a flickering neon sign. Its battered surface was etched with the scars of 100 deals gone bad. Sereth slid in across from him, her iridescent crest low and wary, eyes scanning the room with measured calm. Jace sat so his back was to the wall, gaze sweeping for threats. He felt the weight of every look, every predatory smile. Before they could settle, a hulking Gorthan swaggered over. The brute's skin was mottled gray, tusks curling from its lower jaw, eyes glinting with crude amusement. Its bulk blotted out the neon. The Gorthan leered at Sereth, his voice a low, mocking growl. "What's a pretty thing like you doing with a human? Not enough excitement in your own kind, Scales." Jace kept his voice cold as steel, never shifting his gaze from the alien. "She's with me." The Gorthan's grin widened, displaying rows of jagged teeth. He leaned in, massive hand reaching for Sereth's arm. "Maybe she'd rather—" Jace moved before the Gorthan finished the thought. He flipped the table into the Gorthan's knees, catching the brute off guard. With a fluid motion, Jace drove his fist into the Gorthan's jaw. Bone met bone with a sharp crack, and the Gorthan toppled backward, crashing into a cluster of empty bottles. The bar fell abruptly silent. Eyes turned, wary, calculating. Violence was always a possibility in the gloam, but this was swift, decisive. Jace didn't linger. He grabbed Sereth's arm, pulling her from the booth. She went with him, chin raised, not resisting as he hustled her into the dark corridor beyond the main room. The door swung shut behind them, muffling the noise of the bar. The corridor was narrow, lit only by sporadic pulses of sickly yellow light. Jace spun, pressing Sereth to the wall. His eyes blazed with a mix of fury and something more primal. "I told you not to stand out." She stared up at him, breath quick but unafraid. "I didn't do anything," she shot back, voice edged with defiance. He pressed closer, the words a growl. "You exist." "That's enough." But his hand slid up, thumb tracing the delicate edge of her crest, feeling the subtle tremble in her scales. He was close enough to feel her breath, to see the pulse beating in her throat. You don't know what they do to you, or what I want to do. Desire, sudden and dangerous, crackled between them. The tension, sharp and intoxicating, erased the chaos of the gloam beyond. Sereth didn't flinch. Her lips parted, a challenge and an invitation. Jace closed the distance, his mouth crashing into hers, fierce and claiming. She met him with equal fire, hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. There was no hesitation, no thought of contracts or bargains, only hunger and connection, wild and consuming. The corridor faded. Only the two of them remained, locked in a desperate, breathless kiss. He pressed her back, pinning her to the wall as her hands traveled his chest, claws scraping leather and skin. For a moment, Jace surrendered to sensation, the cool slickness of her scales against his palms, the taste of something alien and electric on his tongue. She arched into him, surrendering not out of fear, but need. The boundaries between captor and captive dissolved. They were two fugitives, tangled in desire that was as fierce as any pursuit. When they finally broke apart, both were gasping. Jace rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, heartbeat thundering. Sereth's crest shimmered with a flush of color, her breath ragged. He drew back, forcing control into his voice. "We need to move. The consortium has ears everywhere." She nodded, still dazed. "Then let's go. The horizon won't wait forever." They slipped back to the Starling, moving as one. The spaceport outside the gloam was a maze of shifting shadows and cold starlight, but neither spoke. The heat between them lingered, every glance an accidental brush of hands charged with new meaning. Days passed as the Starling slipped through the nebula, following Sereth's coordinates deeper into uncharted space. The small ship became their world, a place of stolen glances and tentative touches, of silences thick with words unspoken. Jace found himself watching her when she slept, tracing the curve of her crest, the shimmer of her scales in the dim light. Sometimes, in the quiet, she would lean against him, and he would rest his hand on her back, feeling the steady, alien rhythm of her heart. They trained together in the cramped cargo bay, Jace with his blade, Sereth teaching him the fluid forms of Lyrian defense. The lines between captor and captive blurred further, replaced by something sharper, more intimate. At night, they talked. About old wounds, about what it meant to be hunted, about lost worlds and impossible dreams. When the nebula's swirling storms thickened, Sereth guided Jace from the co-pilot seat. "Now," she whispered, fingers dancing across the navigation hollow. "Adjust the pitch. The gravitic eddies are strongest here. Trust what you feel, not just what you see." He followed her instructions, his hands steady on the controls. The ship shuddered as energy waves buffeted the hull, but Sereth's confidence never faltered. She closed her eyes, listening to the nebula's song as if it spoke to her in a forgotten tongue. At the nebula's heart, the haze thinned, revealing a vast emptiness that glowed with hidden light. Then, as if a curtain parted, the horizon appeared. It hung before them, a colossal sphere of ancient alloy and crystal, its surface etched with intricate sigils that pulsed with a soft golden light. Towers spiraled around its equator, and vast petals of crystalline metal unfurled like the blossom of an impossible flower. Debris orbited the arc, but nothing marred its silent majesty. Jace stared, awe crashing over him in waves. "That's the horizon?" His voice was barely a whisper, reverent. Sereth watched him, violet eyes gleaming with pride and longing. "It's more than a ship," she said. Her gaze traced the lines of the arc, the memory of her ancestors alive in every word. "It's a seed for new worlds. My people built it for yours, to give humanity a second chance. Everything you lost, you can find again, if you're worthy." Jace's mind reeled with possibilities. The consortium wanted the horizon to control colonization, power and profit, nothing more. But as he studied the Ark, something shifted inside him. "Why me?" he asked, voice thick. "Because the Ark was never meant for one alone," Sereth said softly. "It requires both a Lyrian and a human. Two keys, two destinies entwined. My ancestors saw your worlds fall and built this so we could rise together. We're both survivors, Jace. Now we choose what comes next." He looked at her, seeing not a prize, but a partner. His life as a hunter, every contract and betrayal, suddenly seemed small compared to what stood before them. The horizon offered more than escape. It offered redemption, a future neither of them could have imagined alone. He reached for her hand, fingers threading through hers, and together they gazed at the silent promise of the horizon, two destinies entwined on the threshold of something new. Docking with the horizon was humbling. The starling, a battered insect compared to the Ark's incomprehensible mass, drifted toward the glowing aperture that dilated within the hull's seamless surface. Jace gripped the controls, silent, the enormity of their mission pressing down on him with every passing meter. The starling's hull groaned as it entered the vast docking bay, smooth, silent, and strangely organic, as if the ship itself breathed. They emerged, boots echoing against ancient alloy. The bay was cathedral-like in scale, its walls swept with flowing sigils and half-familiar constellations, light shifting in slow, living currents overhead. The air held the taste of ozone and the faintest hum, a promise of sleeping power. Corridors stretched before them, arched and endless, every surface dappled with faint bioluminescent glow. The silence was immense, heavy with time, waiting for purpose. "Where now?" Jace asked, voice hushed. He couldn't help it. His bravado from the gloam felt small here. "To the core, the Genesis chamber," Sereth replied. Her voice was softer than usual, reverent, her eyes wide as she traced the path ahead. "It's the heart of the Ark. Everything begins and ends there." Jace followed, pulse hammering as they navigated the labyrinthine halls. The architecture bent in impossible ways, walls that curved and spiraled, doors that seemed to shimmer and reform as they passed. Every step echoed, their presence stirring motes of light that danced in the air, drawn to Sereth's touch as she led the way with certainty born of memory and instinct. At last they reached a circular sanctum, a space both intimate and infinite. The chamber's ceiling soared high, vanishing into a column of radiant energy that arced from floor to dome. In its center stood a pillar of light, and around it, two pods awaited, organic, luminous, pulsing with the slow rhythm of a living heart. Sereth moved to them, fingers tracing the pod's soft contours. "Symbiosis cradles," she explained quietly. "The Ark was built for unity. No single soul can awaken it. We must trust each other completely." Jace stared at the pods, unease prickling his skin. Trust was foreign to him. Trust had always meant risk, pain, betrayal. But now, the only way forward was together. He met Sereth's gaze, and in her eyes saw the same fear, the same resolve. He nodded, voice low. "All right. Together." They climbed into the pods, the surfaces molding to their bodies, warm and alive. As the lids closed, Jace's heart raced. The last image he saw Sereth's eyes shimmering with hope and memory. Darkness, then light. Not of the eyes, but of the mind. Jace gasped as something opened within him, boundaries dissolving. Suddenly, he was not alone in his skin. He felt her sorrow first, a centuries-deep ache for her lost people, a longing for home and for purpose. Her hope followed, a fragile thread woven through endless grief. And then, to his shock, her admiration, her respect for his courage, the way he stood when others would have run. She felt him too, his loneliness, The years spent with only duty for company, the walls he'd built, the ache for something real. She tasted his battered sense of honor, the way it pulled him forward even when it hurt. And beneath it all, his fierce protectiveness, a fire that flared brighter for her with every shared memory. Their souls, naked and exposed, wove together in a bond deeper than flesh, deeper than thought. For the first time, Jace knew true intimacy, not lust or partnership, but the fusion of two wounded hearts. The arc responded. The pillar of light pulsed, energy thrumming through the chamber, ancient systems awakening after millennia of slumber. Suddenly, alarms shattered the silence. An ancient voice echoed, layered and mechanical. Unidentified boarding party detected. The pods opened, releasing them in a rush of light and breath. Jay staggered upright, still feeling Sereth's emotions echoing in his chest. He saw her across the chamber, disoriented but radiant, the bond shimmering between them like a bridge of fire. Footsteps thundered in the distance. The security feed shimmered to life on the chamber wall, showing armed figures forcing their way through the halls. Consortium troopers, black-armored and brutal, led by a woman with a shock of silver hair. Mara, Jace's old rival. He grimaced. Mara, of course. Sereth's voice was steady, but he felt her fear ripple through their link. Most of the Ark's defenses are dormant. We're exposed. Jace shook off the last fog of the pod. Doesn't matter. They're not taking this ship. The words rang with new conviction, the weight of their bond lending him strength. Sereth reached out, fingers brushing his. The Ark systems. I can feel them, but only partially. I need you to anchor me, Jace. He nodded. I'll handle the tactics. You lock them out, slow them down. We do this together. They moved as one, navigating the Ark's endless corridors with purpose. Sereth sealed bulkheads with a wave of her hand, her link to the Ark guiding them through hidden passages. She vented atmosphere from one corridor, scattering a squad. Jace laid traps, rerouted security feeds, and led ambushes with ruthless efficiency. When troopers broke through, he met them with blade and blaster. Quick, precise, unyielding. At every turn, Sereth's insight steered him away from death. Left, now, she would cry, and he'd duck just as a plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been. In return, he shielded her, taking the brunt of a blast, shoving her aside as explosives tore through a bulkhead. They fought as one, the strange intimacy of their bond sharpening every reflex, every thought. The consortium pressed harder, Mara leading the charge. Her voice echoed through the Ark's comms. Jace, you can't win. Surrender the Lyrian and I'll spare your life. He snorted, wiping blood from his brow. She never could bluff. Sereth smiled, weak but grateful. You are more than I expected, Jace. He reached for her, brushing a lock of her shimmering crest from her face. The touch sent a fresh surge through their connection, a flare of hope and longing. In the heart of the Ark, hunted and outnumbered, they clung to each other, wounded, breathless, but unbroken. The fate of two peoples, the promise of a new world, rested on the bond forged between them in the core of the horizon. The path to the core was a gauntlet of ancient traps and consortium squads. The air trembled with the echoes of distant alarms and the shriek of overtaxed servos. Jace and Sereth moved as a unit, their steps perfectly in sync. He the blade, darting forward with lethal intent. She the shield, her mental link offering warnings that turned near-fatal ambushes into narrow escapes. The Ark itself seemed to sense their unity, its dormant systems flickering to life, illuminating their way with threads of bioluminescence as they advanced. Down one winding corridor, lasers shot from hidden recesses, slicing the air where Jace's head had been an instant before. Left, Sereth warned, voice ringing through their bond as much as through the air. He dove, rolled, and came up firing, a consortium trooper collapsing with a cry before he could trigger the next defense. Sareth reached out, her mind nudging an ancient mechanism. Metal plates slammed down, sealing the squad off behind a wall of living alloy. Their breath came quick, hearts hammering in shared rhythm as they pressed onward. In a hall lined with crystalline vines, Sareth stilled Jace with a touch. Wait. Pressure plates. She closed her eyes, attuning herself to the Ark's systems. A pattern of safe stones flickered underfoot, just visible in the shifting glow. Jace nodded, following her lead, never doubting. Not now. At last, battered and bloodied, they found sanctuary in a preserved biosphere, a garden untouched by centuries, domes of crystal arching overhead. Starlight filtered through, turning the foliage silver and blue. The air was thick with the scent of living things, a balm after the sterile corridors of the core. Jay slumped against a petrified trunk, gritting his teeth as blood soaked his shirt. The wound at his side throbbed with every breath. Sareth knelt beside him, gentle hands working with practiced care to peel away fabric and press a bandage to the wound. Her touch was cool, the scaled pads of her fingers radiating a soft, natural energy that dulled his pain. "You fought well," Jace murmured, voice hoarse but threaded with admiration. He reached for her hand, squeezing it. "We saved each other," she replied, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We're stronger together." He looked at her, seeing past the alien grace to the heart beating in time with his own. He leaned in, lips brushing hers, this time slow and reverent. The kiss was not desperate, but deliberate. A promise forged in hardship, forged in trust. Sareth's hands framed his face, her crest shimmering in the soft light. His traced the elegant, unfamiliar lines of her shoulders. Jace gathered her in his arms, rising with a strength he didn't know he had. He carried her to a bed of moss, its surface cool and yielding beneath them. He laid her down in the starlight, every movement gentle. She reached up, drawing him into her, and together they found solace in each other's arms. This was no longer the fever of need, but the choice to share, to belong. Their bodies met with a tenderness that banished the memory of loneliness, a union of equals at the edge of the universe. Later, they lay entwined beneath the crystalline dome, watching the slow drift of artificial stars. Jace pressed a kiss to Sareth's forehead, and she traced idle patterns on his chest. For a moment, the war seemed impossibly distant, but purpose called them forward. They rose, gathering weapons and resolve, moving once more toward the heart of the Ark. The passageways grew stranger, machinery whirring to life as they approached the core. At last they entered a cathedral of spinning rings and radiant energy, a place that thrummed with the promise of creation. Above them, a lattice of golden light spun in intricate patterns. At the center stood a dais, its surface pulsing in time with Sareth's heartbeat. "This is it," Sareth whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "Once I start, I'll be vulnerable. The Ark will need me to guide it." Jace gripped her shoulder, fierce resolve in his eyes. "You won't stand alone, I swear it." She nodded, trust passing between them like a living thing. Suddenly, the great doors exploded inward, metal shrieking and splintering. Mara strode in, flanked by a squad of black-armored elite soldiers. Her eyes were cold, her blade already drawn. "Hand over the Lyran, Jace," Mara called, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Walk away and live." Jace stepped between Sareth and the soldiers, carbine raised. His jaw was set, every line of his body promising defiance. "She stays. The Ark is ours." Mara's lips curled into a hungry grin. "I hoped you'd resist." She gestured, and her troops surged forward, blasters roaring. Jace fired, his shots precise, each blast finding its mark. He ducked behind a spinning ring, using the core's machinery as cover, weaving through arcs of light and metal. Mara's soldiers pressed hard, but Sereth, at the control dais, surrendered herself to the arc. A column of light rose around her, encasing her in brilliance. She became a conduit, her mind reaching deep into the ancient systems. Jace's world shrank to combat, each shot, each movement, a calculation of survival. He felt pain flare as a blaster bolt seared his shoulder, another tearing across his side, a third grazing his leg. Still, he pressed on, driven by the thread of Sereth's presence in his mind. Her fear, her resolve, her love. He felt it all, and it drove him forward. Above, Sereth channeled the ark's power, energy built to a fever pitch, humming through the air, vibrating the bones of the ancient ship. Jace heard her whisper in his mind, "Hold on, just a little longer." He gritted his teeth, fending off the last of Mara's soldiers. The air crackled. Sereth unleashed a wave of force. The shockwave rippled through the core, passing over Jace like a warm tide, but striking the soldiers down as if they were made of dust. Only Mara remained, shielded by a personal barrier, her eyes wild with rage and disbelief. She advanced, blade drawn, boots ringing on the metal floor. "Just you and me now, Jace." He dropped his empty carbine, drawing his blade. The duel began. Steel on steel, a clash of will and history. Mara was ruthless, her strikes a blur of speed and anger. Jace, battered and bleeding, let her wound him. Shoulder, thigh, drawing her in, sacrificing pain for position. At last, he saw his opening. He let her blade bite deep, twisting inside the pain, and drove his own blade through her defenses. Mara stumbled, disbelief in her eyes as she fell to her knees. Her blade clattered away, echoing off the spinning rings. Jace staggered, barely able to stand. He looked up at Sereth, still radiant in the column of light, her arms outstretched as she commanded the rebirth of a world. The core pulsed, golden energy flooding the chamber, washing away blood and darkness. The ark was theirs. The bridge of the horizon glowed with new life. Soft, ambient light pulsed through the living alloy underfoot, illuminating the delicate circuitry that traced the walls in veins of gold and blue. Holographic displays shimmered, orbiting the main console like a constellation brought indoors. The great viewport, once clouded with dust and neglect, now gleamed, revealing a world transformed. Outside, a once dead planet spun in the void, its surface alive with promise. Emerald forests stretched across continents, sapphire seas reflected the light of a young sun, and clouds swirled in a sky newly born. The world below breathed, as if the ark's awakening had poured its ancient hope into the soil, the rivers, the air. Jay stood at the center of the bridge, patched up but whole. Faint scars marked his skin, but the worst of his wounds had closed. The work of the ark's metatech, or perhaps Sereth's touch, or something stranger still. He felt lighter, as if a burden he'd carried since childhood had slipped quietly away. The ache of battle was gone, replaced by a warmth that radiated from somewhere deeper than bone. Sereth joined him, her presence warm and steady, a gentle current beneath the song of the ship. She had shed the last remnants of flight and fear. Now she wore a simple tunic, her crest gleaming with health, her eyes bright with wonder. The connection between them was tangible, a thread of living energy, woven during their trial in the Genesis chamber and tested in the heart of conflict. It hummed with shared memory and silent understanding, unbreakable. They stood side by side, gazing down at the newborn world. The silence was profound, full of possibility. "It's beautiful," Sereth whispered, her voice as soft as breath. She lifted a hand, fingertips brushing the glass as if she could touch the forests below. Her eyes shone violet in the glow, and a single tear traced the curve of her iridescent cheek. Jace reached out, catching the tear with the back of his finger. His touch was gentle, reverent. He studied her face, memorizing every line. The woman he'd once pursued as quarry had become so much more: teacher, partner, lover. He felt the echo of her awe in his own chest, magnified by the bond they shared. "Our ancestors dreamed of this," she said, her gaze never leaving the vista. "A union, creation, not just survival, but something new, something better." Jace let her words settle in the quiet, feeling the weight of history and hope. He wiped away the last trace of her tear. "We're its guardians now," he said softly. His voice, once so hard-edged and wary, was different, softer, steadier. "And each other's." Sereth smiled, leaning into him. Her crest brushed his shoulder, a caress both intimate and proud. Her slender tail curled around his leg, warm and silken, a gesture of trust and belonging from her people. She pressed closer, heart beating in time with his. "We are no longer fugitives, Jace." He slid his arm around her waist, drawing her close. "No," he agreed, voice low and certain. "We're home." They stood together, silent, watching the world turn. Around them, the bridge hummed with the gentle rhythm of the horizon's awakening. It was as if the ship itself understood what had been won, what had been risked, what had been lost and found. Jace looked down at his hand, feeling the pulse of energy that linked him to Sereth. Through it, he sensed her gratitude, her joy, and something deeper. A love that had been forged in fire and tempered by trust. He remembered every moment, the first time he'd seen her, fierce and proud in the ruins of Vera 9. The way she'd met danger without flinching. The softness she'd shown him when he needed it most. He remembered the moment he'd realized that his life, once governed by contracts and credits, had changed course forever. He tilted her face to his, searching her eyes. "This place, it's more than a second chance. It's a beginning." Sereth nodded, her expression luminous. "A beginning, yes. For us. For those who come after." Together, they turned to the console. Holographic controls blossomed at their touch, displaying planetary systems and settlement plans, genetic blueprints, histories of both their peoples. The Ark was more than a ship. It was a library, a garden, a sanctuary, a future. Jace's hand lingered on Sereth's. "What do we do now?" "We welcome them," she replied, voice brimming with hope. "We teach them what we've learned. We protect what we've made. We become more than the sum of our scars." For a while they stood in the quiet, wrapped in each other and the vastness of possibility. Their story was inscribed now in the circuits of the horizon, in the soil and water of the world below, in the pulse of their joined hearts. No longer were they captor and captive. The words fell away, irrelevant as dust. Now, they were something new. A soldier and a survivor, human and Lyraean, the last of their kind and the first of something else. Partners, creators, lovers. Jace drew her close, lowering his head to hers. Sereth met him, her lips cool and sweet, her hands rising to cradle his face. The kiss they shared was slow and deep, filled with everything that had gone unsaid. The promises made in battle, the dreams spun in the dark, the hope that now stretched before them like an unbroken horizon. Outside, the world waited, a sanctuary born of violence and forgiveness, from a mercenary's unlikely act of compassion. Jace had come to claim a secret, but Sereth had claimed his heart and given him a universe. He kissed her again, slower still, as dawn broke over the world they had made together. And in that moment, they knew. Tomorrow and every day after would belong to them.